shot at and injured the US President Ronald Reagan in 1981, has been released from a psychiatric hospital. John Hinckley Jr. was found not guilty by reasonable insanity following the shooting inside a hotel in Washington. In July, a judge ruled that Mr. Hinckley's psychotic disorder had been in remission for more than 20 years. Tanzanian officials say an earthquake near Lake Victoria has killed 11 people and wounded nearly 200 others. Rescue workers are trying to reach people trapped under collapsed buildings. The Colombian rebel group, the FARC, has handed over a first group of child soldiers as part of a peace accord signed with the government last month. The International Red Cross said the group of aged children would be given mental and physical health examinations before being taken to reception centres run by the UN and local social services. A rerun of Austria's presidential election, due on October the 2nd, looks set to be postponed because of faulty glue on postal vote forms. Austrian media reported that a number of postal voters complained their ballots couldn't be sealed, rendering them invalid. BBC News.
Hello and welcome to this final episode of The Borders of Sanity. Over the past 4 weeks, we've been travelling the globe. People experience and explain mental health and mental illness. In Japan, we met Tori Sugari, a manga artist with depression, who's been using his manga to trace unexpected turns in how Japanese society understands his condition.
Then I was introduced to a Disney house somewhere near my workplace. There, I was told it was also depression. I was completely shocked. What's depression?
We explored some of the reasons why Swedes are so worried about the mental health of adolescents, from parenting to life pressures to a possible culture of vulnerability.
There were many more that trusted life in the 80s. They wanted to do everything, even if it was dangerous. They was hungry for life. Now they are afraid of life.
In the UK, people who hear voices talk to us about how they learn to cope and interpret, negotiate, and even befriend their voices.
They're not unintelligent. They actually help me in situations. They tell me how to dress, tell me how to cook, they tell me my house is okay, they tell me lots of things. And quite honestly, no, I don't want to block them out.
And we went in search of healing in Ghana, home to a marketplace of competing ideas and treatments when it comes to psychological distress, from faith healing through to the small but growing presence of Western-style psychiatry.
It's difficult for us to erase the customs and beliefs and practices that we have here, because we have inherited it over the years, but it is for us to be conscious of what that is doing to us.
So where has that whirlwind tour left us? Well, for me, revealing as each place and each person was, I'm left with as many new questions as answers. So for this last program, we've brought together some of those questions, along with others raised by listeners, and we're going to be putting them to two people whose job it is to puzzle these things through. Vikram Patel is a psychiatrist, researcher and campaigner on global mental health issues, especially in low and middle income countries. He divides his time between India and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in the UK. He joins us now from New Delhi. Dominique Bayard is an anthropologist working on adolescent and global mental health, both at Vanderbilt University in the United States and King's College, London. Right now, she's in Nashville, Tennessee. Our first question comes to us via Facebook. Mubarak S. Umar messaged us asking, what is the cause of mental illness? We start with Vikram.
Mental illnesses are complex conditions. They are typically the result of an interaction of multiple factors: genetic factors, biological factors, environmental factors, social factors. And it is a confluence of these factors in varying combinations that would lead to mental illnesses in particular individuals.
Yeah, I think we all have a desire to be able to find a single cause. It would make it easier if we could just say, like we do in some arenas of physical health. I got this because of a virus, and now I know what to do. It would help us act, but the reality is that mental illness is, as Vikram said, a complex interaction of factors. And more we're learning that the biological is just one of those, or that, in fact, what we do at the environmental in terms of our social relationships, how well we're supported, whether we have jobs, that this actually has an effect on the biology of mental illness.
Yeah, I think if one had to be rather crude, one could divide up the explanations for mental illness into biological and non-biological approaches. I prefer to really think about these approaches as being complementary to each other, and that we really do need to understand both of these in order to fully draw the picture about mental illness. Biological approaches are predominantly focused on genetic vulnerabilities and biological disturbances, for example, in brain function, as the causes of mental illness. The non-biological explanations tend to invoke ideas around social relationships, social disadvantage, cultural factors, for example, beliefs about harmful spirits or things that happen in one's previous life or one's ancestors' lives, etc., as being important causes of mental illness.
Could I get you to listen to this, a clip from our program on adolescent mental health in Sweden? This is the psychiatrist David Eberhard.
If you go back in time 30 years, you had no patients that were seeking help because their girlfriend broke up with them or their dog died or something like that. Now today we have 5 or 6 cases like that every day.
What do you make of that? Dominic, if I can come to you first. There's what looks like a trend towards young people suffering increasingly from things like anxiety and depression. Is there a problem here, I wonder, of new pressures on young people? Or is resilience no longer being cultivated in the way that it was?
Yeah, I think that's a very provocative question. I think it's probably a bit of both. The language we use and the kind of mental health care awareness that we can do in a society like has been happening in many industrialized countries can actually reduce their, young people, reduce their resilience by creating kind of awareness of what could happen. I also think it's a very important question to look at what these new pressures really are. For all intents and purposes, we think of this context as a well-resourced one. Why should these kids be having such a hard time? But I'm sure that the pressures of the internet, of Facebook, of professionalization, of an increasingly competitive field, of schooling and demands, I think all of that probably does have quite an effect. So I think it's a bit of both. So I just think it's an area that needs a bit more research before we jump to either conclusion that, this is, the language of medicalization as we speak of it, talking about all these vulnerabilities all the time actually makes us more vulnerable and more anxious about whether we're okay versus, is this real? I think it is real, and I think the language may not always be doing us, the best support. I think we need to really research what's been going on there. We've gone over the course of 80 years in history in industrialized society from an adolescent period being quite short and kids getting jobs pretty early on, becoming mothers and fathers, in their mid-20s, to a period where we're now stretching out adolescence and, you have to get multiple degrees before you can become a full adult. And that itself, the stretching out of the adolescent period, can create a lot of doubt and anxiety and further demands before you can just settle in your adult identity.
Vikram?
So with regards to adolescence, I think first of all, we need to be aware that the majority of mental health problems that we see in adulthood actually have their onset in adolescence. And adolescents historically have been quite reluctant to seek care from health providers, professionals, and certainly very reluctant to go to mental health providers. So at one level, one must welcome the fact that young people are now seeking care for what seems to be more and more mild or even trivial problems. On the other hand, as Dominique says, it's also important for us not to medicalize those sorts of problems.